Boss cut my day rate and hid it as hours. One binder of receipts and a certified letter flipped the room and forced him to pay back. Hit like, tap subscribe and ring the bell. A small-town wage tyrant runs into receipts, off-ramps, and karma. I wanted quiet more than glory, so I bought an old toolbox, rented a tiny garage, and promised myself to fix engines, not people. On the first morning at the lube shop, the air tasted like burnt coffee and winter rubber. Above the bays, an ancient radio hissed a country song that could not find the station. The owner, Peter, shook my hand like a salesman and scanned my sleeve tattoos as if they were receipts. His smile loosened only when I named the muscle cars on his office calendar, then matched his grin with one more, Bricklin. He laughed. You know your tin. I said, I know the work. For a season, the routine felt like recovery. Oil warm as soup on my knuckles, the sweet solvent sting, the click of ratchets like chapel bells. Then Karen arrived with perfume that smelled like a dare and a voice tuned to humiliation. My first paycheck under her watch came thin. The envelope crinkled like a lie. I laid a pay stub printout on his desk, the line items neat as a parade, and asked, calm, did we change the deal? Karen cut him off. No more daily rate. You get paid only if the hours match. I kept my eyes on the stub. Peter, you and I agreed. 100 a day, come rain or early close. He swallowed. She smirked. Downstairs, the oil pump coughed. Upstairs, the clock ticked like a fuse. I slid the stub into a folder tab labeled incidents and added a sticky note that read keep receipt so paper could remember when tempers would not. Out in the bay, a Civic idled and a customer asked, everything good? I answered, getting there. Because the air already knew we were not, and because the next week would decide whether this room served cars or egos. The floor smelled like hot brake dust. My gloves squeaked when I clenched them. Somewhere a door closer sighed as if the building expected a fight. I am a veteran with a rebuilt knee and a temper I keep on a leash. The leash is longer when machines are honest, shorter when people are not. Quiet was the plan. Wrench midweek, tune my hot rod on Sundays, pay bills on time, and let the town forget the uniform. Peter's promise fit the shape of that plan. 100 a day, 6 days when needed, 1 day to breathe, paid even if rain or early close stole the hours. I wrote the terms in my pocket notebook, dated the page, and tucked a photocopy of the offer letter behind it so memory could not play favorites. In the bay, I learned the team by sounds. Carla's laugh like a socket dropped on concrete. Ray's habit of humming before a tough bolt. Good people who carried pride the way grease carries light. Karen carried noise. She liked sunglasses indoors and questions that landed like subpoenas. She tasted power like a cook tastes sauce, then shouted when it scorched. The first week she toured the shop, heels clacking like a metronome, and lectured a kid about tinted safety glasses while the sun bounced off the hood like a mirror. I glanced at the safety board where the laminated rules still showed Peter's signature, then took a picture of the page with my phone so policy would not shift under our feet. That night I printed the photo, slid it into incidents, and wrote the name of the vendor who sold the glasses on a sticky flag because even common sense needs a receipt. At home, the apartment smelled like rubber mats and fried onions. I soaked my hands in hot water and told myself the growl in my chest was only fatigue. On the counter, the offer letter glowed pale under the stove light, and I drew a small square on the margin labeled off-ramp, because even bullies deserve a clean door out before the clock runs. Ray nudged my shoulder and asked, "You settling in?" And I said, "We fix cars, not people. I can live with that." The first crack sounded like paper tearing. Friday's envelope felt light. Inside, Karen's handwriting replaced the typed stub with a crooked grid that pretended to be ours. I laid the old offer letter beside the new math and circled the promise with a dull pencil, then circled the shortfall until graphite dust smudged my thumb. In Peter's office, the blinds leaked hard noon light. The place smelled like toner and envy. "Did we change the deal?" I asked, placing a pay stub printout next to the offer copy. "Bad weather," he said, voice thin. Karen cut across him. "No more paid if you did not work 10 hours. Our agreement is per day," I said, steady. She leaned in. "It is per my day now." I clicked my phone and took a photo of the desk. Offer, stub, her note, timestamp tucked small in the corner. Back in the bay, I printed that photo on the label printer, slid it into incidents, and wrote a 2-word caption that tasted like metal. Pattern forming. That weekend, a bank statement arrived and the deposit line proved the loss. I highlighted the numbers, then wrote the amount in words on the margin, so the story stayed lawful inside my head. Sunday night, I typed a short email that read confirmed terms from our meeting, attached the photo, blind copied my personal account, and archived the sent copy in a folder called Bricklin because names can anchor courage. The radio hissed a verse about long roads. I stared at the ceiling vent and felt cold air on my face. Somewhere a drip tapped time into a bucket. On Monday, she met me at the stairs and said, "You got something else to whine about?" And I said nothing, because the next move would not be a speech. The hallway smelled like mop water and hot dust, and the door closer exhaled as if it knew the room was about to learn a new word. Leverage. Escalation did not shout. It dripped. Schedules stretched like old belts. Travel stipends vanished. Karen's voice found a higher register any time another adult asked a fair question. She staged little trials in the bay, summoning an audience to watch her recite policy like scripture, then invent new verses. When a tech wore tinted safety glasses because the sun knifed through the door, she barked OSHA violation, and I pointed at the laminated rule and said, "Approved lenses, see line 3. She smiled like a cat. Rules change. I took a second photo of the safety board and printed it beside the first like a before and after for a room losing its memory. On a week I covered extra shifts across town. I kept a travel log in my pocket notebook, then taped gas receipts into incidents with neat lines of clear tape so no one could pretend the miles were imaginary. That same week a call came about a friend from the service, and I will skip the details. Grief smells like metal and bleach. I told the crew I would keep my head down in the pit, and they gave me space. Peter arrived with Karen, looked at my neatly stacked filters, and decided to perform leadership. "Clean up this pigsty," he said, voice puffed. I looked at the stacks, then at him. "Not today. Move on." Karen leaned over the pit rail, perfume sharp as solvent. Big guy found his mouth. "Walk away," I said, and heard the pump cough like a laugh. He puffed again. "If you do not like it, leave." I wiped my hands slowly, printed a quick photo of the clean station for practice, set it on his desk, and walked out into bright air that smelled like hot asphalt and a storm coming. The door clicked behind me with a hollow pop, and the silence that followed felt like a bolt sliding home, which is another way of saying the next step had already chosen me. Low points are not always collapse. Sometimes they are paperwork that pretends to be authority. Peter called me to the main office, where Lemon Cleaner fought with burnt coffee and lost. He unfolded a disciplinary memo that read probation in bold type and a pay cut that would have embarrassed a fair employer. Karen folded her arms and performed a smirk. "You are lucky we kept you," he said. "Disabled vets need structure." I stood still and let the sentence die between us. "You should reconsider your life choices," I said evenly, "and who you put a pen next to." He tried to laugh. It sounded like a tool dropped into a drain. I set an audio recorder on the desk, clicked it on, and read back the terms we had actually agreed, then asked him to initial the memo to confirm who authored the new math. He signed out of habit. I slid the memo into incidents, felt the folder gain a new kind of weight, and wrote 3 words on my pocket page. Repair, not theater. On the way home, I called a labor lawyer recommended by a buddy from the service. The man answered in a calm voice that sounded like a torque wrench. He said, "We build a floor with evidence and let them dance through it." I paid a retainer by phone and printed the confirmation email, toner sweet in the air. At the kitchen table, I sketched a plan with 3 verbs, document, archive, escalate, and drew a small square labeled off-ramp for later, because even now I wanted a way to fix the shop without burning it down. Then I set an empty sleeve in practice titled Receipts to Authority and stared at the ceiling vent until the swirl of dust looked like a map I could follow tomorrow. Outside, tires hissed on wet pavement, and in that hush I heard my own breath steady, which was the sign I needed to start counting instead of cursing. I wrote the decision like a torque chart and kept it plain. Step 1, document every deviation and freeze the math. The offer letter, the daily rate in writing, the shrinking stubs, his initialed memo, and a clean ledger that spells what is owed. Step 2, teach the team the habit. Photograph posted rules, keep schedule copies, log travel in ink, save rude texts because tone proves power. Step 3, present receipts in the right room with 1 off-ramp before any lever moves. I typed a demand letter that offered a door. Restore the day rate, repay missed days in full, post a written travel and safety policy, and quit the floor shaming. If he accepts, we fix the shop. If he refuses, we file with the state wage unit, copy the veterans clinic advocate who knows my knee, and let a calm investigator weigh the paper. On my desk I set artifacts like wrenches. The offer copy, a bank deposit printout, the discipline memo with his ink, a phone photo of the safety board, and an email thread that repeats the promise in simple words. I printed the demand and slid it into the tab labeled practice, then clipped a certified mail slip on top so the clock could not pretend to be fog. Ray read the letter and tapped the margin where a tiny square read fair choice. "We are giving him air," he said. "We are giving him options," I answered. The bay smelled like hot rubber and citrus cleaner. A fan ticked like a patient metronome. Mom asked softly if I could forgive a decent man trapped by a loud one. "I can forgive and still require repair," I said, and underlined repair until the paper felt warm. I packed a recorder, a legal pad, and a small list of verbs. Identify, establish, present. So nerves would not improvise where facts should sing. When the envelope sealed, it tugged my skin like a promise, and the printer light blinked once like an eye that would not forget. Preparation felt like sanding rough metal until it stopped biting. I built a packet with tabs and a one-page index that even a tired eye could follow. Summary, timeline, pay math, travel logs, policy photos, and the off-ramp letter. The copy shop breathed warm toner as sets slid out. The stapler rasped like a zipper closing resolve. At the state office that smells like carpet shampoo, I pulled a certificate that shows the shop in good standing. So the claim would land on a real name, not a rumor. I stamped the copy and filed it. I printed a checklist for the crew: acknowledge, log, photograph, copy, and taped it by the time clock where sweaty hands rest. Carla led a tiny clinic on stubs and rates. Ray ran a dry run of a comm meeting: motion, pause, request, confirm. Each of us wrote a short statement in plain words. I notarized too because signatures give memory a spine. In incidents, I added a gas receipt strip and a voicemail transcription where Karen says the quiet part, and I drew a small arrow toward the word pattern. I called Peter and offered the meeting: 1 hour in a neutral room, one subject, one decision. "Bring Karen," I said, and kept my voice level. "She runs my floor," he replied. "Then let the room hear her rules," I said. He asked if lawyers were coming. "Only if you need one," I said, and hit print on 2 more demand copies. The bay smelled like belt dust and oranges. The radio found a steady station. My pocket vibrated with a new message from a number I did not know. I opened it and saw a photo of the safety board with a new line about eyewear taped over the old print. The tape edge was crooked and the ink was fresh. I took my own photo, added it to practice, and set the recorder by the door so I would not forget it when the clock reached the hour. Execution lived in a small conference room that smelled like dry markers and old coffee. I set the recorder by the pitcher and slid the packet across the table. Index on top, ledger next, memo with his initials, then the demand with the square marked fair choice. Peter sat forward, elbows white. Karen leaned back and smiled at the ceiling as if victory lived there. I kept verbs on rails. "Your promise reads 100 a day," I said, tapping the offer copy. "Your memo cuts that without cause." She snorted. "He left early. I owe him nothing." I placed the bank printout beside the stub. "The deposit confirms the shortfall," I said. Ray pointed at the photo of the safety board. "You called an eyewear rule, then taped a new one after the fact," he said. I turned the page to the off-ramp. "Restore the rate, repay the days, post policy, and this ends now with thanks." Peter looked at the recorder, then at his initials on the memo, and his breath caught the way a belt catches on a tooth. Karen waved a hand. "He can sue," she said. "We prefer to repair," I answered, and slid a certified mail receipt to the center, so the deadline had a face. Peter said nothing. The clock tapped the wall like a small wrench. I added one last artifact, the email from the Veterans Clinic advocate offering to sit if needed, then folded my hands. "Fair choice," I said. "Door 1 or door 2? The vent sighed. The fluorescent bulb hummed. The plastic cups smelled faintly of lemons. Peter reached for a pen. Karen closed the folder with a palm and smiled a thin smile. "We decline," she said. I nodded once, lifted the recorder so the click would mark the page, and stood with my packet in both hands, already turning toward the next room that owns the levers. Consequences began as paper instead of thunder. The state wage unit acknowledged the complaint with a comm letter that smelled like toner and patience. I filed the copy and underlined the line that lists remedies. An investigator called in a voice that ran cool as a shop fan and asked for clean scans. I sent the packet and the audio, then sat with Ray in the bay while the pump whispered like rain. Within a month, the unit issued findings in dry type that carried weight. Unpaid daily wages due, travel underpaid, and a penalty for retaliation cloaked as discipline. We signed a settlement that tasted less like triumph and more like air returning to the room. Back wages landed, then the penalty. I photographed the deposit screen and placed the print behind incidents, then wrote the amounts in words on the margin so the habit stayed clean. More important, the shop adopted a policy one sheet in big friendly letters. Day rate honored as signed, travel reimbursed by map, safety rules posted and versioned, and any change requires notice in writing. Carla's statement kept its spine. Raise logs turned state into simple math. 2 juniors got raises when a payroll service audited the classification that Karen had fuzzed. Peter apologized in a sentence that was mostly air and a small nod. I said thank you and left it there. Karen moved to a desk in the back where vendor calls matter more than people. She kept her sunglasses and learned to keep them off the floor. In the bay, the radio finally found the station. The air smelled like citrus and hot steel. The lift groaned and then purred. I filed the signed order, clipped a copy of the new policy to practice, and wrote one quiet line. Process upgraded. Then a truck pulled in and the driver leaned out with a grin I had not seen in years and said, softly, that he was proud I had kept the leash on my temper and used the right room. I keep the folder labeled incidents on a shelf above my bench and the tab labeled practice in the front. Because memory loves stories and justice loves receipts. I am not proud that we needed a state letter to remind grown people how to honor a promise. I am proud we offered a door, named the harm without venom, and turned temper into verbs. Revenge by design is not a torch. It is a breaker you flip to keep a building from burning twice. When I lace my boots now, the shop smells like rubber and citrus. The radio holds a station, and the checklist by the clock reads like a pact we wrote together. A veteran at the wash bay asked whether I would work for Peter again. I work for the work, I said. And the work got safer. The ledger balance mattered, but the better prize was a floor nobody can kick loose when a loud mood walks in. Day rate honored, travel clear, safety written and versioned. Questions answered in daylight. Ray still hums before a stubborn bolt. Carla still laughs when a socket clinks on concrete. I still carry a leash on my temper and a pen in my pocket. If you ever find yourself under a boss who treats wages like weather and rules like a mirror that flatters only one face, pick verbs over villains, offer one real off-ramp, and let the right room read the receipts out loud. What would you have done in my bay? And where do you draw the line between empathy and boundaries when a promise gets shaved by someone's pride? Tell me in the comments so the next tech can borrow your courage. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, and ring the bell so you never miss the next story, and stay downright awesome while you do the work that keeps people moving. I will pin a one-line lesson above the bench where my hands can see it between jobs. Repair before revenge, receipts before speeches, and keep the off-ramp visible even when your jaw wants the last word.